What's up, everybody? Michael Titan here, and hey, we're back! And today is the first episode of a new show that I have on the channel called What They Play! What They Play is an interview show where we get to talk to people from the industry, around the industry, and just people who love games in general. It's an opportunity for you guys to get to know the people behind what goes on in the world of video games. And I really think that's a cool idea. It's something that not a lot of Let's Play channels do, and I wanted to bring it to you guys. Something fresh, something new. I'm always trying to find something good for you guys to watch, and I really hope you enjoy this show. But man, did we get a good first guest. I am blown away and so grateful that he gave us the time to come on the show. But our first guest is Patrick Klepek. If you don't know who Patrick is, I'm going to put a crap ton of links down below because he is involved with so much stuff. There's literally something for everyone. So do yourself a favor, watch the interview, and go check him out. He's passionate about his work. He really cares about the people involved, and just all I can say is nothing but good things about him, so go check him out. And by the way, I just want to say one quick thing. It wouldn't be my channel without a fair share of hiccups and mess-ups here and there. And for about 5 to 7 minutes into the video, I realized that there was a little bar here that I could have clicked off that says, add more people to your video call for free. It's just some little thing that Skype does, and it tells you can do whatever. I didn't know it was there, so I apologize for that. So, you know, I click it off about 7 minutes in. I'm a professional. Nah. Alright guys, sit back and enjoy the interview. This is the first episode of What They Play with our first guest, Patrick Klepek. Welcome everybody to the first episode of What They Play. Today with us we have former news editor for GiantBomb.com, now senior reporter for Kotaku. He is the co-host of the Match 3 podcast. He is the host of Till Death Do Us Part, a podcast he does with his wife. Awesome! And he's also the superstar of his very own YouTube channel with Mario Maker Mornings, and by far the only guy who can make wearing a hot dog costume look cool. This is Patrick Scoops Klepek. How you doing, sir?
Quite the resume there. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I was worried because I gave you a quote of 5 to 10 minutes for the actual show, and I was worried the whole intro would take up the whole time because you're everywhere. You're literally everywhere.
I got a lot going on, you know. It's there's so many fun things to do on the internet, and there's you know, especially now that, you know, I'm with Kotaku, not Giant Bomb. You know, I'm doing all these video things that I'm experimenting with, and it's been a lot of fun to see what people react to. And yeah, I'm doing that podcast with my wife, which is something I've never done before, and that's been a ton of fun. So yeah, but it's weird when you say it. It explains why I feel tired all the time when you list out everything that I seem to be doing.
And I was going to ask you the next question, when do you sleep? Because I don't think you do. On a personal note, legitimately, me and my wife watch Mario Maker Mornings every chance that we get. It's awesome. And you recently raised, $10,000 with Dan Reichert for charity?
Well, so it was about 13, and then...
Oh, wow.
And then probably with a mixture of people, I think there were a lot of people that donated and then went, actually, and so there's probably been like, I don't know, $300 or $400 that have come back from that, but still an enormous amount of money. People were extremely generous. It was just going to be $200, $100 from me and Dan, and then I said,
wow.
Hey, I bet people might be into something like this. Let's do a GoFundMe. I didn't know how to do that. I figured it out. We set a goal of $500. I mean, we blew past that in like the first hour. And yeah, in the midst of the reckoning, we raised a bunch of money. I gave that money, half the money, to Dan, and then this morning I actually just submitted was it $5,878.13 to the American Heart Association, which was my half of the donation. That
is incredible, and congratulations on that. That's super awesome.
Yeah, no, it truly blows me away. And then I've had. There was like a small news station that did a story about it for some reason. I think it was because there was someone who was a producer at that station. It was a late night thing, and then they were just like, I don't know, this seems cool. So they packaged this news segment about it, and then I heard from family. They're like, we saw you on the news, and I was like, what? Okay, this is cool.
Well, I mean, maybe out of control is you kind of want those things to go out of control, though, because you're literally spreading like goodwill and everything else, and this is the time of year, so feel good about yourself.
I do. I feel really good about myself. Thank you for the pat on the back.
You're welcome. With that, I do want to jump into something. It's a question that I have been burning to ask you because it resonated with me with what we did on the channel. Me and my friend Seth and Ray, we played through the entirety of Until Dawn. And the way that we played it was that we pass the controller for each episode that we played. So we were constantly fucking up each other's decisions, and everything was horrible from episode to episode based on what we were doing. But because we played it that way, we ended up being able to experience the game in a way that we have never experienced it on our own, by ourselves. My question to you, sir, is what game in your history of playing games have you gotten to experience in a way that maybe somebody else who played the same game just would never ever be able to have that same connection with? What game resonates with you in that way?
Well, I mean, the Telltale games are a series of games that I actually played with my wife. My wife she likes games, but she's not like into games in the same way I am. And but yeah, I like sharing this thing that I've dedicated my life to, that I think about all the time, and I like to share that with her. And so she really enjoys adventure games, but all the button prompts and quick time events and things like that are just it's a pain for someone that is not used to a lot of the BS that we experience in video games. And so, she's a big fan of Game of Thrones and Walking Dead. So one of the things that we've done over the years is we play the Telltale adventure games. I hold the controller, but she makes all the decisions.
Okay.
So I have to live with her terrible choices that she makes for our adventures. And I actually get really excited when she's not paying attention, and then there's like a timed prompt, because it's like the one time that I get to make a choice on something that's going on. But that's sort of a unique experience that we have in which, I'm technically moving the character around the screen and pressing the buttons, but the person who is guiding us to the end is actually my wife and the choices that she wants to make.
Have you ever considered streaming one of those?
We have thought about, so when I reviewed Until Dawn, speaking of that game, and the whole time we were like, oh, this would have been so much fun to do, like with a live stream and a chat. But I was playing it ahead of release, so if I wanted to continue working in this industry, there was not something I could do.
Right.
But we have thought about sitting down and doing like a second playthrough, because Until Dawn specifically is pretty short. There are so many different choices you can make, and it would be a lot of fun to do that with some folks watching. So that is something that we want to do at some point, maybe in the winter when we're all huddled down with the negative temperatures. Maybe we'll play through Until Dawn a second time.
The fun Chicago weather. So speaking of real quick on Until Dawn, there's a playthrough where someone only decided to keep Matt alive. I should point that out. It's ridiculous. But I just had to mention that if you haven't seen it, it's pretty ridiculous.
I'll have to check it out. I mean, that's what's great about that game is you get so much agency over the characters, whether you want to play into the horror tropes, whether you want to subvert the horror tropes. There's just a lot of really cool things that you can do in that game that I hope people remember as we get to Game of the Year time, like just how inventive Until Dawn was, because it was so easy for that to go wrong, and I'm glad that it turned out as well as it did.
Absolutely, and with little to no marketing. That's the thing that blows my mind. There wasn't a lot behind it pushing it forward. So it really was up to the community. Kind of like when the community decides what's an esport. This community decided this game needs to be heard. People need to play this. So,
absolutely.
Yes. In the same little, I guess, thread here, I personally have never backed a Kickstarter before until this one, but I so want the Friday the 13th game to be good. I so want it, and I know you have to have an opinion on this so far.
Yeah, so I, as sort of matter of policy for my work, I don't back any video game related Kickstarters.
Right.
I don't think that's like sort of an absolutist position. I know there are other games writers that do back games Kickstarters, just looking at them as sort of a pre-order, and that's fine. That's a totally fair way to look at it. So as much as I am a fan of the up and down in quality Friday the 13th series, I'm mixed on the Kickstarter. Do I want to play a Friday the 13th video game? Absolutely. Do I want to play an asynchronous multiplayer game based on Friday the 13th? I'm a little more mixed on that. Especially having played Until Dawn, I want to play Until Dawn with Jason Voorhees. Like,
yes.
That's the game I want to play. And so while I'm hopeful that this game will turn out good and maybe it'll be fun to screw around with, it's hard for me to imagine that I'm going to spend a whole lot of time with it, given that is different than my experience with other multiplayer shooters, which is to say, I don't play them. So the Friday the 13th hook is an interesting one, but I want that single player game. Like, that's, if I'm going to play a horror game, that's what I'm looking for. And unfortunately, they didn't hit enough goals in which they could put in some single player challenges, as they were calling them. But who knows? Maybe that's something they can work into the final game somehow.
Well, with the next question, this one actually, I mentioned Seth earlier from our Until Dawn playthrough, but he had a question that I'm passing on from him, and okay. It's kind of out of nowhere. If Patrick Klepek was handed a gigantic bag full of money right now, okay? But you had to make a game. What game would Patrick Klepek make at this moment in his life?
I have.
What do we need?
I've thought, so I'm a huge proponent of VR. I'm not necessarily convinced that it's going to be a huge thing in the short term, but my experiences with VR have been incredible. I think if I was to work on anything, like working on a VR horror game, I think would be profoundly interesting. Specifically, like one scene I've always had in my head is something in horror that's always gotten under my skin are alien abductions. If you've ever seen the movie Fire in the Sky, go look up that abduction scene on YouTube.
And you will never sleep again.
Yeah, make sure you get a drink by your side because it's horrifying. But part of what's been interesting about VR is sequences where you actually don't really do very much, right? Like it's just sort of a roller coaster. You're just sort of there for the ride. I imagine a sequence in which you have the VR helmet on, you wake up in your bed, you can't move, and then you were abducted by aliens, and you go through a sequence where you're like dragged in the spaceship, you're experimented on, like all of that sounds utterly terrifying. And I think it would be perfect for VR. So if I had a bag of money, I think that's probably what I'd work on is a hardcore alien abduction VR experience. I think is something that I wish was in the world and is currently not.
I'm going to request that no one give you that money because I don't want people dying of heart attacks from the game you're going to create. So
that's a fair criticism of my idea.
I did have VR on the list here of things I wanted to talk to you about. Have you played Affected, by the way? Have you gone through the scenarios of Affected?
Hold on, I'm gonna Google search. I want to say
there's a hospital scenario. There's a circus scenario, and then there's a manor scenario. And
I think I downloaded it, but I have not actually messed around with Affected.
That was probably some of the most atmospheric fear. You know, I played through Dread Halls. I know that you have too, and since they've updated, it's even scarier. But I that was my first experience with Presence. What was your first experience with Presence? And for those who don't know, Presence is literally, to dumb it down as much as possible, your brain is tricked into thinking what you're seeing is real, what you're experiencing is there. What was your first experience, if you have had it, with VR?
Certainly the horror stuff, I think, is some of the most effective means of experience that sort of feeling. I think largely because VR removes a whole lot of your mechanisms for coping with horror. If you are reading, watching horror media, you can touch, you can look around, you can remind yourself it's on a screen, it's in a book. There are ways of like putting yourself back in the world in a way that makes can kind of ground yourself. That doesn't happen in VR, right? Like you can close your eyes, but you open your eyes again, it's right there. You can't escape from it in the way that you can with other forms of horror media. And then, I think the Dread Halls was definitely one of those early instances. Additionally, when I experienced for the first time the handsets or the controllers for both the Vive and the Oculus, those demos, it convinced me that traditional game controllers are not the way forward with VR. Right. Not to say that won't be a component, but it just, holding a traditional controller just doesn't make a lot of sense with the ways that VR enables interactivity. And so these more tactile experiences where you're gripping, these sticks that allow you to make you feel like you're holding fingers. I mean, I ultimately feel like it's going to be at some point just like a glove you put on, and then you're going to be able to interact with things in the environment with like, haptic feedback that like makes it feel like you're pressing on something. Like, that seems like the end goal, and that's where I really experienced Presence in the last year or so. Once I kind of got over the, sort of novelty of VR, is the controllers really make the difference.
You said glove. Immediately I thought of Power Glove, so hopefully we don't, go that particular route. This is probably the most serious question that I actually have for you. In 2014, we saw a trend that I wish would have gone away, but instead it increased in a much more egregious fashion, and that was the trend of the broken game. In 2015, obviously, Batman Arkham Knight being the biggest culprit of this thing. From a consumer and developer standpoint, both of them have to come together at some point to make a stand and make a change. What needs to happen to guarantee that, and guaranteeing we're never going to guarantee, but what can we do and what can be done to better this going forward? Because it seems to not be lightening up in any way.
Well, I might disagree a little bit. I think the best way to send a message to game publishers is to hit them where it hurts, where, it's money, right? I mean, I think often outrage is extremely common on the internet, but people don't tend to follow up on their outrage. The famous example being that screenshot from Steam when Call of Duty the second Infinity Ward one. I don't know why I'm thinking on the name. Anyway,
okay.
there was a whole kerfuffle over dedicated servers.
Right.
And PC players said, if there's no dedicated servers, we're not buying the game. And they made a Steam group that said, we are getting here, we are collecting, we are showing our protest. And on day one of that game coming out, all of them were playing the game. Which is to say that game players are very dedicated, and they may say one thing but do another. And I think Ubisoft has already reported that Assassin's Creed Syndicate, the numbers are down for the sales of that game. You could partially look at that as just Assassin's Creed kind of experienced this long tail, and that there's just less interest in the 19th entry in that series. You could also say that Unity had such an immense impact in that it was so broken, it was so messed up on day one that that impacted that game, and that people weren't as interested in picking up the next one. They didn't just assume, oh, we're just going to get the next one from Ubisoft because there's another one. So I think monetarily, that's kind of the best method because that's really the only way that they're going to make changes. It's one thing to sign a petition. It's another thing to yell on Twitter. It's another thing to not put down your $60.
Yeah, you actually have to back it up. You have to actually prove. And by doing so, it's hard for people to miss out. But they even though they are angry and whatever else they are about a game, they still want their fix. And that sounds weird to say, but they still want to play the game, and they want to hope that they can get the best experience out of it. But if you put the money down, if you give them that, they're not going to change. It's not going to stop. So I guess wrapping this up really quickly, I just wanted to ask you, do you want to plug anything you are in or doing? I mean, we already went down the gigantic list in the beginning, but is there anything else that you would like to say that you are doing that people can go check you out right now?
Well, one of the big changes is that I hit a certain threshold that Twitch has for becoming a partner, which means there's now sort of a subscriber button at the bottom of my Twitch channel, and the stuff that I do on the side outside of Kotaku's my day job is stuff that I'm doing in my spare time, and I'd like to long term down the line. We're not talking about tomorrow or the next month. Be fully independent, doing my own work, like working for the people that enjoy my work rather than the ebb and flow of the ad market and all those things like that. So, things like Twitch are a step towards saying, like, is that viable? Like, am I able to, pull in a decent income and do that outside of the safety of a regular job? So I guess that's what I would say is like, that's one step I'm taking. It's people do not need to feel compelled to support me again. I have a day job, but it is something I'm exploring for the long term because I want to be doing this 10, 15 years from now.
Right.
And there are fewer and fewer jobs in what I do. And I think the best way to get around that is to go into business for yourself. So, that's kind of stuff I'm exploring and seeing how that pans out in the next couple of years.
Well, people need to know that from all of the time that I've followed you from your days past to Giant Bomb and so on up until Kotaku and everything you've done in between, everything you do is filled with such passion. You can tell that you really are dedicated to your work, and you're just 100% an expert in everything that you do. It's amazing, and I want to thank you for your.
That's what people tell me every day on the internet, that I am 100% right. And I'm always an expert.
There you go.
I'm always nailing things. That's definitely what my Twitter feed says every single day.
And Patrick, you are so humble. It's amazing.
I'm lucky enough to be doing what I'm doing. I try and remind myself that all the time. It's people out there, people like yourself that have been fans of my work, that it's why I keep doing it, and it's why I have a chance to keep doing it. So I'm humble because there's no way around it. Like that's the reason I get to do what I do, and I'm very thankful for it.
Thank you so much for your time and coming on the show. This is the first episode of What They Play with Patrick Scoops Klepek. Thank you, sir.
It can only go up from here, so good luck with your second episode.
Hey guys, welcome back. I am so happy that we got a chance to talk to him. It was so cool. He's such a nice guy. I really appreciate the time that he gave us, and what can I say? It was an awesome experience. So thank you, Patrick, for that. I really appreciate it. But like all the videos, we gotta end somewhere, so right here seems a good enough spot. What the hell am I doing? But before we end this, I do want to say one thing. This is not going to be an every week kind of thing. I mean, I hope it becomes an every week thing because I want to line up the guests. But for now, we're just talking to people. We're just trying to get more guests on the show. So it'll be sporadic, but it is something that I want to bring to you guys more consistently down the line and in the future. So just be patient. We'll get another guest on soon, and we'll get another interview done. And I guess there's only one thing left to say. You know the drill. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, become one of the Titans, and I'll see you guys in the next video.